Welcome to Thriving the Future podcast, where we're finding positive solutions to thrive in the tough times ahead.
Welcome back to Thriving the Future. For the last few episodes, we've had our property walk, and then we talked a little bit about spring. So this
we picked
episode,
up some advertisers.
Yeah, we picked up a sponsor, the Homestead Journal, and you can hear their advertisement at the end. We highly recommend them. What we're going to talk about in this episode is what is thriving. We've talked a little bit about that, having a small community that you can fall back on. We have monthly workshops. We share and trade things. And also it's a mindset. It's not prepping or whatever else. It's a mindset, skill-based.
It's that place after you've taken care of all your basic needs, spiritual, physical, mental, physical, whatever order.
Yeah, and it even goes so far as looking out for opportunities. Like right now, we bought incubators. Or I've got chickens and I've got a rooster.
You brought in a rooster, yes.
Yeah, so now I've got the rooster making me some
better choice than
eggs.
A fox to guard the hen house, yes.
Yeah, and he's adapting really well. So his name is Freddie. And so...
You named him?
Well, they named him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we just picked up the name. Yeah,
that's fine.
I don't usually name chickens. I usually call them chicken. So
I get enough trouble about how cute my chickens are anyway. I got real problems with the incubating I'm doing. I'm going to have to keep people from attaching.
Oh,
because if we have extra roosters,
yeah,
they're
exactly.
going to become food. And
absolutely,
I have people that go, "Oh, they're so cute! They're so cute! They're so cute!" and name them and pet them and play with them, and then
right. Yeah. We're in May. TSC does not have any chicks.
They don't?
No. Neither location. Orscheln doesn't have any chicks. Yeah, so I mean, people are looking for chicks.
Facebook page, because
so right there's an opportunity, right? So people are looking for chicks, can't find chicks. We have a strategy that we're doing where we're going to raise landrace chickens.
Wait a minute.
What?
I thought landrace was seeds.
Yeah, I know. I would think so too, right? But we want something that's adapted to your land. And if I raise a bunch of chicks, if there's roosters mixed in there, I don't want them cross-pollinating with their brothers and sisters, right?
You don't want a serious inbreeding problem?
No, then I would be like everybody else in corporate America.
And end up with turkeys that need help creating babies. Okay.
Yeah. Or chickens that fall over, So, yeah. So what we do is then if I have a rooster that I'm not going to use or not going to eat, then we rotate them around in our group. And then somebody else has a rooster and they rotate it around, and then we can make sure that we get some diversity.
Why don't I just get a merry-go-round and set the rooster on there and rotate it that way?
And line the hens up, yeah. Okay.
No, I mean, you rotate it. So, you've got a rooster. I've got a rooster.
Right.
I'm incubating eggs. You're going to incubate some eggs.
Yes.
I take a rooster from my group of incubated eggs.
Right.
Because it has mixed genetics between my Belforfingtons, Australorps, and this rooster.
Sure.
And I give you one of those roosters.
Mm-hmm.
And you give one to a friend of ours.
Right.
And he gives me one from his.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we maintain that circular order of rooster passing, we get plenty of genetic mixing as the breed develops that works best in our land, and we select for the most thriving of the birds.
Correct. And it may be...
And then maybe you also set that up with 2 or 3 other people, and you have a separate rotation going to bring in genetics, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Plus we have an opportunity where we can sell some chicks to folks or trade for something else we need.
Yeah, if all else fails, we raise them up for 16 weeks, and we give a get-together, and we...
Graduate them to freezer camp.
Right?
Right.
Maybe we have some to grill for a workshop sometime.
That's true. And we can also grow them out until they get 16 weeks or until they get feathers and stuff, and then sell them, because then they would be different, because then somebody doesn't have to raise them from a chick. You can even take them and raise them until until they're ready to lay, and then sell them, and then somebody doesn't have to go that route. So those are all the options. There's some nice opportunities.
Or we can work on teaching them and taming them really nice, so that we have nice tame roosters to sell.
Mm-hmm.
People are always looking for a rooster that's not going to attack them, right?
Yeah, especially if you have kids. We've had a chicken before that was a Americana, and it was just a crazy thing. So, yeah. So, doing all these things and these plans that we have together equals thriving. We end up thriving as a community, thriving as individuals, and then we can help some other folks too.
Okay, so obviously this is something that's developing for us.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't born this way.
No, I wasn't.
Take us from birth to, my life's not working, I need to get to surviving, and then from surviving to thriving. Walk us through that.
Sure. Well, raised city kid, of course. And then went in the Air Force, still city kid. Went in IT, still city kid. Got to about 2014. I was working in downtown Kansas City, and this was when the protests were happening with the Ferguson riots and everything else. Even though that was in St. Louis, it was also also going in Kansas City, and the one across from Union Station was the Kansas City protest place. And there were several times where they said, you all are going to have to go home early today, because there's going to be enough of a protest that you're not going to be able to get out of the parking lot. So one of my friends, who was a prepper, said to me, okay, thought experiment. How do we get home if we can't get out of here? What would you do? And so we started talking about prepping, and then I ended up getting a...
How does prepping solve getting out of a building with a mad mob outside?
If you have a bob, you have your bug out bag, then you can go cross country or whatever and stuff like that. Getting out of downtown Kansas City under normal circumstances isn't easy either. I mean, it would take half an hour.
I'm not sure I'd want to try and walk out of downtown Kansas City.
I agree.
To a riot.
I agree too. But, at least...
And I say walking because we know me, I'm not running.
Right? And then having a bug out bag made a difference on several occasions where I cut myself when I was working on the house in a remote location. Had to doctor myself right there, or whatever else. Food when you need it. If some emergency comes up and you can't go home. One time we had a chemical leak from a chemical plant near our house that I didn't even know was there, and we couldn't get back to our house. Things like that. So what are you going to do in those situations? So that's the prepper area. We were still living in town, lived in a townhouse, things like that. But it started opening up the ideas of we need to be a little bit more self-sufficient. My wife
What did self-sufficient mean to you at that point?
Basically, what could you live if you lost your job? How long would you be able to be resilient or whatever else, and things like that? And being most IT right now is contract, so if you're working as a contractor, you're constantly worrying about if you get rolled off, and then it averages 2 months before you could find another job, right? So that was a very real thing. We wanted to grow our own food, so we moved out to the country, and then immediately figured out that gardening was hard. You can't learn it quickly, and it's a skill that has to develop. Not to mention the fact, as we've talked about, you have to de-stress and detoxify your land.
If it takes 50 days to get a tomato,
right?
You only have 50 days to get it right.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, you don't get to try again until next year.
Right. And whoever owned the place before me, even though they had a garden spot laid out, it was so chemically intensive and compacted that it was real impossible to grow anything without chemicals, lots of chemicals. So it took several years
Miracle-Gro. That's what they always told me when I was
and that's what they had all in the garage, right? Yeah. And lots of chemicals. And it took a couple years to build soil and get it to the point where it was detoxed enough to be able to grow things, as well as those skills, like, so you planted a tomato and then it didn't.
You forgot to water it, or you didn't weed it well enough, or you didn't water it on time, or you were not watching the weather, and you had one of those heat spikes at 95 degrees after 70-degree weather, and it baked the soil, and you didn't get it watered.
Absolutely, yeah.
Didn't know it was coming, so you didn't water extra in the morning, so it stayed cool, and all those easy little mistakes that kill a plant.
Right. So I have an Excel spreadsheet that I keep every year on what I've planted, what I harvest, what the general cost of food is, so I can compare things, and sometimes I track my inputs too. And I plant hundreds of things, and then there's a bunch of them that fail. Especially
Wait. You're still failing, and you keep trying?
Yeah, it's like season 7, right?
Right.
And there's quite a bit of there's still quite a bit of failure, especially in the tree department, right? So I graft apple trees, and I plant apple trees, and there's a rude awakening that the stun method, the sheer total utter neglect, doesn't work on apple trees or nut trees unless you're planting them from seed. And when you read the book, Mark Shepard's book, then he actually says this doesn't work on grafted nursery plants.
You got to pay attention to all them little details, not listen to the podcast highlights at the beginning.
Exactly. So, I've had a lot of failures last year. I think every single graft I made failed because a big windstorm came through or something like that. And so far this year it's going better. So, but learning those different things and then developing what works on your land. So I had my own landrace of mortgage lifter tomatoes that was doing really well. And then blight came in. So those did real well for a couple of years, and they adapted pretty well. And then I got blight from something else.
You still have some of that seed around, or?
I think so, yeah.
Well, that's kind of land adapted, right? So if we find one that is mildew resistant,
right,
then we'd need to cross-pollinate.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or you would,
and it probably, the blight probably came in with an outside plant, or I brought it in with some soil or something that I got, or compost, who knows. But so one of the things is keep with it and just don't give up. Now, you can't really
skill building 101.
Yeah.
Keep trying and don't give up.
So and I was still with the idea that I'm going to prep my way out of this stuff. Faced with and what you see this all the time. So posting memes and posting other things, people feel good, but then they don't change their lives, right? Yeah, and then everything on social media and even on the Telegram channels that we follow have been people posting memes, and you're sitting there saying, okay, so if this conspiracy theory you posted is real, then I would expect you to change your life. And then you ask, what are you doing about it? Are you gardening? So if there's food shortages, you just posted about food shortages. Are you gardening? What are you doing to handle that?
This is where, and we should probably cover this at some point.
Right.
Our greatest enemy is ourself.
Exactly.
Because posting that meme is what steals all your intention to plant that garden.
Mm-hmm. And it steals other people's attention to be able to, be planning that stuff and things like that. So, one of the reasons that we started this podcast was because we were having these kind of conversations that we normally have, and we just weren't hearing this anymore.
Wait. People have conversations like our podcast all the time?
We do.
We do? Oh.
Because we were traveling to events or to friends' houses or whatever else, and having these conversations, and we're like, wow, we really wish we could hear this, because everything else is pretty much the same. Everybody's saying the same stuff, or they're posting things, then they're not really changing. So we started having, what does community really mean? Oh, well, I'm gonna roll up if something bad happens. I'm gonna roll my gate shut, and I'm going to defend my compound, right? And I'm gonna live off my food, and what's that
calculation look like when you go look at your food and how long it lasts without resupply?
Well, that's what's funny. So interesting anecdote. Tonight, I went to go make some meatloaf, and I needed some tomato paste. And then I went downstairs, and I have a lot of expired tomato paste.
Well,
So,
expired is a...
yeah. So then I had to figure out if it's expired too much by figuring out whether, opening it and sniffing it and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
But,
perfectly fine.
Yeah, it was fine. It's a fungible skill. If you don't practice, you're going to lose the skill.
Your buy what you eat and your rotate your pantry
Yeah.
skill atrophied.
Yeah, and then also cook what you buy
Right.
instead of using it as the backup plan that you never touch. Right? Because otherwise you go, hey, wait a minute, 2 years has gone by and
Yeah, buy what you eat and eat what you buy. Yeah.
right. And then really and we've heard this in other places, so if you're going to store food or have a pantry, are you really going to eat beans and rice in a bucket? I mean, that's nice if the
I
whole world
wish.
goes to hell. But, for the most part, if you like macaroni and cheese, buy macaroni and cheese.
Now, my AIP diet will not let me eat beans and rice.
Yeah,
But before my AIP diet, I used to eat a lot of that.
right. Well, and you don't eat macaroni and cheese either.
Right.
So see, having beans
Right.
and rice in a bucket isn't going to do you any good.
It might. If I'm starving.
Sure.
And I don't care that I'm going to fall apart and sleep.
Or you could feed someone else, right?
Right. Or I can feed somebody else.
Right.
But then I have a rotation problem for sure.
So focusing on doing stuff, developing those skills.
Which skills? Because we just kind of said that the prepping skill is kind of a dead end
Right.
to some extent. It needs to be done,
Sure.
but it atrophies. But which skills are moving you to thriver instead of dependent upon the system to supply your food with an expiration date?
Right. So some of the things we've done, we've talked about gardening, right? Foraging. We have a couple of articles on the website where going out and really paying attention to foraging. I've just foraged a bunch of nettles this last week, which you would have never thought itchweed. Oh, why? Why would you do that? And how do you cook itchweed and gather it without getting all itchy? And then can you really eat it? Well, you can if you steam it and you prep it right, or prepare right. So developing those kind of skills. We brewed our own vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
And turned out much better because I hate vinegar, but I really like the vinegar that we make. Right?
Okay. So those are the skills.
Sure.
Take us to what it's like to be arriving at thriving, and then how you see those skills being an advantage as time goes along and we hit the future.
Well, so if you can make your own stuff, either from foraging, one of the things that we're in May right now, right? These weeks used to be called the weeks of want. It was in between when your stored food ran out in the olden days before we had supermarkets, and before you had your first crop of greens or whatever else, right? Then the average person would have to go do some foraging, either for nettles, for fiddleheads, for mushrooms, whatever else, and to bridge that gap, right? So those things are
Get over some of their repugnance and eat some possum and squirrel.
squirrel, or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And some
It's
of those
foraging.
things. That's foraging as well.
A lot of people think foraging only think plants, but there's
Sure, right, and things like that. So that can bridge the gap. I mean, being out of work is no longer a surprise. I mean, right now there's people that are looking for employees, and it's not too hard right now, but that will catch up, and then then we'll see that again. And sometimes your biggest challenge or your biggest catastrophe or whatever else is not the world going to hell. It's I lost my job, or I got sick, or or whatever else, and things like that. And then you are the focal point for that. It's not everybody else. So, having a community is important for that. Being able to share things and trade things among yourself, as well as, having somebody to help you out, bring you some eggs or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and that gets it off of me. I'm going to be me. I'm going to close up my front gate, and I'm going to defend my compound.
So what is your focus? If it's not me, what is your focus now?
Well, it's bigger than me. It's also the community.
And in what way are you focusing on the community? I'm looking to draw this out a little bit because you went and foraged nettles. We did this, we did that. I did this, I did this. There's still a lot of me there.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a lot of me there still.
Right.
And we're still in the process. We're still moving towards thriving. We're thriving in the little stuff. Let's start.
So why should people be listening to the podcast? What is so special about hitting this mystical thriving space?
Well, for one thing, it's mentally refreshing. So, there's a bunch of stuff in the news today. Is it in your circle of influence or circle of control?
I don't know. I didn't check.
Yeah, I know. I'm asking the response question, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of it's in your circle of influence and control. The politicians doing stuff far away, for the most part, you have no control over. And, voting ain't going to help us out of any of this stuff. So, we get back and focus on what you have influence on and what you have control over. And maybe, that's me, my friends, my community being our small group, my garden. It's not watching memes on, and this is one of the things when we set up the podcast and we set up the Telegram group. It's like we want to hear what your successes are. There's tons of online communities out there, right? Especially on Telegram, that they're just memes all day long. They're just people griping about the latest thing of the day, right? And memes are clever and all that, but we want to see positive solutions, right? So that was our focus when we started the podcast, was instead of talking about all that stuff, and
instead of endlessly defining the problem, let's talk about the solutions and the process we use to find what we think are solutions.
Right, and
get more people involved in the middle of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And stay positive instead of constantly looking over your shoulder at whatever conspiracy theory or big bad guy or big bad wolf or whatever else that you think is there, whoever it is, right?
I mean, anybody that's been following me on Twitter has been watching that, I can make a whole salad from my yard.
Sure.
With the dandelion greens, a few of the herbs that are there, the henbit, the chicory, the violets and dead nettle and all that you can find around. You could make a salad every day out of a decent-sized yard, or just walking down the block out of your neighbor's yards, right?
Right.
That is seeing abundance where everybody else sees a scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else saw weeks of want. It's been called the weeks of want. But we already know the solution to that. The solution was to go to the woods where the abundance was,
right,
and bring it home. So it really wasn't weeks of want. It was weeks of, I would prefer this food that I can't have now, right?
Mm. So, yeah, that's interesting. So instead
because the abundance was there, but we're so scarcity mindset focused with prepping and other stuff that we automatically buy that story. It was the weeks of want, so they went and foraged mushrooms. It was the weeks of want, so they went and got fiddlehead ferns. It was the weeks of want, so they went and checked the asparagus patch every day. It was the weeks of want, so they had to eat squirrel and possum. Right?
I'm grinning right here, by the way. This is awesome.
Right?
So, yeah.
That's not weeks of want.
Yeah.
That's weeks of different work to get the food.
Yeah.
And we believe it because we are so tied into a scarcity mindset.
Interesting. That's great.
And that, I think, to me, is one of the biggest differences about thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Surviving is, I want, I need, scarcity.
Sure.
Thriving is turning off that voice in your head opening your eyes and just seeing what's out there, seeing the dandelions, seeing the violets, seeing that going,
Right.
well, I need to learn to eat this.
Mm-hmm. And like
This
you
is
said,
abundance. It's here. It's provided.
Mm-hmm.
Things like planting the Egyptian walking onions, right? They came up on their own. They came up earlier. They were up and working towards ready before I got stuff planted in the garden because it was too early yet, right?
Sure.
Instead of seeing the problem as a problem, see it as a solution, look for the abundance and add the abundance upon abundance upon abundance, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And like you were said, when you start eating those kind of things, you develop the different enzymes to handle those. You develop the taste for that.
The enzymes to break it down so
Yeah.
that it is palatable, yes.
Right. And then you'd also develop the taste for them, right? So,
Right.
you know, a lot of stuff like lamb's quarters are somewhat bitter. But
Right.
that's good.
And then you find out a secret. I didn't have quite enough lamb's quarter for this, right? So I put in a little dock and I put in a little dandelion and I put in a little bit of this. Oh, wait a minute. The flavor profile changed because those bitters interact
Right.
the same way salt interacts with meat
Mm-hmm.
and produces this other flavor.
Right.
And then a good vinegar on top and, you're way past surviving and
Right.
you're really looking around going, was it want or was it mindset?
Mm-hmm. Some of the skills that I've done this year, we talked about vinegar. That was new.
Mm-hmm.
Made mead for the first time. That was new. All of this since last fall. We put apples through the apple grinder as a
pressed 'em?
community, and we
Yeah.
pressed them out. Made a new kind of cider out of that. Made some apple cider vinegar out of that. Learn the whole thing around podcasting, how you do your RSS feed and everything else. Learned WordPress so I could make the website.
Where did you get all this time? Shouldn't you have been at Costco every day?
Or watching TV or interacting on Twitter or whatever else. Yeah, well,
Watching the news and then yelling on Facebook till you're too tired to do anything but watch another Star Trek rerun?
oh yeah. So basically what I did was I deleted Facebook.
Oh, new skill.
Yeah. I deleted Facebook. I limit my Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I question whether I really need to post this or that. And most of the time I don't, because it's not within my circle of influencers' control. Learned some new things about crypto. Took the Bitcoin Mystery School class. Figured out that we could actually create our own coins.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like mind-blowing. I reduced my debt by a significant amount in the last 6 months by not driving here and there and everywhere.
Good. It sounds like the biggest skill you got was gaining control of your attention and your focus.
And that's
And
true.
you did that by practicing smaller skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, get up a little bit earlier in the morning, spend some time in prayer, and then if I have time left, then on the podcast or the website or editing or do whatever, right? So I carve out little times there where I'm not intruding on my family's expectations of time. And I canceled Netflix,
Yeah.
which was good, because I was really only watching old-timey shows on there anyway, like Star Trek.
It might be cheaper to just buy the DVD set.
I have most of them on DVD anyway, but some of them
yeah.
I didn't. But
We'll just
things
have
like
to
that.
get you burning those all off and putting them on your Raspberry Pi.
yeah,
Then you can fight your attention.
yeah. I built a Raspberry Pi. I figured out how to put in the different cards so that it would have different OSs based on that, depending on which, because it doesn't run off a hard drive. It all runs off of a SD card or whatever you flash on the EEPROM. I could have multiple OSs here.
There was that.
Yeah, mixing up my own seeds. Got a new Milpa
Cool.
mix this year. So Milpa is a bunch of seed that's put together, and it's corn, squash, and greens,
Okay,
and
yeah.
beans. Basically a legume in there, so that you build soil, and then you have different harvested vegetables throughout the entire summer. So first greens will come up, and then squash and corn will come up, depending on when you plant it. And there's an article over on freedomfarmer.net that I posted that basically if you plant it real early, then you get a green centric bed.
Mm-hmm.
If you plant it a little bit later in May, you'll get a squash-centric bed. And then, but it still has
here's a question.
corn and beans and everything else. And then it created such a good mulch over the top that when I went back this spring and turned it over with the broad fork, it was dark and everything. And I did nothing last year except turn over the sod, put the grass side down, and then plant milpa over the top of it, and then throw some wood chips on it, and that was it. And then it built that much soil in that year.
Preconditioned what was there.
Yeah. What were you going to ask?
I'm beginning to wonder about the milpa. Would we be better to have a greens milpa, a corn and squash milpa,
Mm-hmm.
and then like a beets and turnips fall crop one?
Yeah.
So that we're not necessarily wasting as many squash and corn seeds early
Sure.
in the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I did that a
Or-
little bit this year too. So I focused more on greens, and I swapped out some of the corn with spring lentils.
Mm-hmm.
So that bed will be more greens focused. And then for the corn-based beds, I use things that won't choke the corn out. And then the squash-based beds, I've been adapting the mixes so that they're a little bit more, so they won't, like you said, plant a bunch of squash and they don't come up because the greens choked them out, right?
I'm not necessarily against it, but at some point, as seed cost goes up, it's a
Sure.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I look at seeds that don't germinate as free fertilizer.
Right. Or they may come back next year, right?
It either goes into the seed bank or it decays into the soil and feeds other seeds. Because a seed is a packet that contains all the nutrients to grow a plant or start a plant, right? So,
And while you're going along and you're harvesting during the year, there's a certain amount of that is going to get turned over and it's going to come back next year, whether it's cowpeas or whatever else, right? Cowpeas did really well. So, and they did a really great job at building soil and mulch. So, and buckwheat, yeah. So I did all those.
I think that kind of sums things up
Right.
well and explains why we're happy to have the Homestead Journal as a sponsor. Because they are focused on teaching the skills and these mindsets as well.
Thank you for listening to the Thriving the Future podcast. Check us out on the web on thrivingthefuture.com. Also, come and join our conversation on Twitter at thrivingthefute, and on our Telegram group, there's a link on the website. This podcast was produced by Scott the Freedom Farmer at freedomfarmer.net. Copyright 2022, thrivingthefuture.com.
Join us at the Homestead Journal in living out the classic homesteading ethos on the path towards a simple life that speaks to the heart of humanity. We're an online community embodying and helping our members develop an indestructible homesteading mindset. Become someone who adds walk to the talk and applies proven old world protocols in a modern context. Find us at thehomesteadjournal.net and follow us at thj.net on Twitter.
Are you a freedom farmer? Check out freedomfarmer.net, where I focus on skills over stuff and designing an intentional life. That's freedomfarmer.net. If you are interested in starting a podcast and you would like some consultation, how to find your niche, how to grow your audience, how to develop that consistency, contact me at thrivingthefuture@gmail.com.